The member for Bowman.
It may be useful to evoke the memory of eye surgeon Fred Hollows and his outstanding remarks in the mid-70s that brought through the mainstream media to the rest of Australia a realisation of the true conditions on Aboriginal communities. From Hollows we learnt that solutions to the Indigenous crisis as he saw it lay not purely in white Australia, but Indigenous people had to lead. And then, of course, a generation later, it was former Indigenous Minister Mal Brough who, through the Northern Territory emergency response in June last year, for the first time broke a generational fixation, a left-wing ideology that believed that only Indigenous Australia had the solution to Indigenous problems. From that intervention onwards, it was clear that so many of the challenges that are superimposed onto Indigenous Australia will require a combined effort to fix it, and that is the essence of the intervention. Now, while the Minister has already departed, let it be recorded in Hansard that that spiral-bound, rote-read speech, presumably prepared by someone else, was utterly lacking, utterly devoid of passion or life. Because what she had in that 15 minutes was an opportunity to defend the intervention and to make it absolutely clear that she would rebuff page 23 of the recommendation, page 23 of the report that she received a few weeks ago, covered in the Minister's own liquid paper, sneaking through with those 5 recommendations upon which this matter of public importance is based. And that is to bring to an end income quarantining, to make it, so euphemistically as it was in the report, voluntary for those who wanted to remain on it, to make it compulsory only for those who are involved in the enrolment and the attendance at school or for infant health, and to obviously to remove then, by implication, income quarantining for chronic alcoholism, violence, abuse of tenancy agreement, destruction of housing, antisocial behaviour and all the rest. That's what's written in the report that's been tabled by the Minister. She had an opportunity today and we got nothing less, as I've said, than a bland and anodyne response to the report. Let's remember some history, because it's only been 9 months in government, and across the aisle, of course, falling over himself was a Prime Minister who rushed to apologise, and then, to make it look like the sleeves were being rolled up, did announce some teachers the next day. And since then, what have we seen? Bear one day of pick facts on an Indigenous community, virtually nothing. The Indigenous field has been left vacant for 9 months. Let's remember that with this review in place, it's almost been used as an excuse to do nothing. There's been an excuse to not take those rough edges off the intervention, to not support it where it needed support, to not give additional resources where it may have been required. It's all fine to add an additional 100 teachers. We could have done so much better than the 18 alcohol inspectors. We could have done even better than the 11,000 that have currently had child health checks. There is so much more to be done that could have been done, and so much more that additional resources could have been used towards. What we've had is an excuse that because this intervention is under review, it has to be in some black box, not reinforced and not supported. Judge not then on their absence from the field, but by the legislation that they've been moving at the same time. This is a government that has sought to change the rules on pornography, that sought to change and soften the rules on broadcast of 18+ subscriber broadcast subscription television into communities, that have sought to provide loopholes so that if you have a boot full of pornographic DVD material, you may simply say, I'm moving through a prescribed area, and you simply that person can simply move on and not be intercepted. The very point of the intervention was the damage, as Sue Gordon has pointed out, as many have pointed out, that alcohol, kava and pornography do. You have a minister that can read a speech like this that preceded me, only to then have further relaxations in permits, broadcast of pornography and, of course, availability of pornographic DVDs on the very communities where we are trying to break that dysfunctional cycle. Now, it's been referred to before as that horrid sort of dysfunctional cycle, if I may quote it, of piss, petrol, poker and potato chips. And here is the first time that we have coherent voices, Mr Speaker, of mums who finally have shopping trolleys full of food, of children who finally have food in their bellies. And yet instead we had this unbroken nexus, supported by the other side of this chamber, that allows that ongoing relationship between big men, chronic alcoholism and opposition to the intervention. And given 15 minutes to support the intervention and the principles on which it's based. And I don't care which side of government came up with this intervention, but let's remember just how weak the support was. It was there, but it was weak and through gritted teeth from this current Prime Minister when it was announced. It may run deeply against the vein of left-wing ideology, and as Marcia Langton pointed out today, it runs against, in the Australian, it runs against those human rights advocates who are caught up in 50-year abstractions about the sanctity of the individual compared to collective social rights. We need to move away from that and remember what the intervention is based upon. It's based upon the children. And as Sue Gordon has so well said, for whatever breach there might have been of human rights, it is no match. It is no match for what has been neglected by successive governments and the damage that has occurred to children. That's why the intervention is there, and how absent that kind of support was from the Minister. Mr Speaker, we need to remember that income management is in effect 50% income management to simply ensure that 50% of income is spent on clothing and food. I don't see that as some sort of human rights violation, and please forgive me if it is. I don't see support for children to attend school as being some form of human rights violation. Remembering we're operating in an environment of territory and state governments, many of whom their education departments have railed against encouraging attendance at school. They've railed against providing school attendance data to Centrelink for privacy concerns. I mean, these are education departments that do not back up the very principals who, on their communities, school principals who want to ensure improved attendance at school. Those principals aren't supported by their own departments. That's where this debate was as recently as 12 months ago, and it took the former coalition government to change that, to break that, to connect school attendance to Centrelink for the first time. Such a novel concept. We regard it almost as normal now, but it hadn't happened for a generation. The intervention is about health. It's about health checks. My urging to the Minister, don't lose the nerve now. You've got a report that provides an out. Don't lose the nerve, because this intervention is about providing housing that isn't destroyed, tenancy agreements that are respected. Don't lose the nerve. It may well be about changing land tenure agreements that some academics can twist as being some human rights violation. Don't lose the nerve. It's about delivering housing stock where it's needed most. It's about providing meaningful employment and about meaningful on-the-job training. That means reforming CDEP, not protecting it in its current form and waiting another year. We do not have the year to lose. Don't lose the nerve. And of course, most importantly of all, it's about an opportunity to break the cycle of antisocial behaviour that comes with chronic alcoholism. The women of the communities are speaking, but they've been liquid-papered so often out of this report by a selective choice of an individual to write this report, and of course by the very people who were the architects of this intervention being ignored in the report. The well-known Bill Glasson, who played such an important role, also an eye surgeon. Was this individual consulted about the Minister's report? In the entire review, Dr Bill Glasson was not even consulted. And I remember those words spoken in the House of Commons by Churchill, that we are leaving that period of procrastination, of half measures, of baffling and soothing expediencies, of delays, has come to an end. And we are arriving at a period of consequences. That was last year, and we have another similar moment appearing right now. A minister that can either go soft on this intervention and follow the recommendations that minister allowed not to be liquid-papered out. They remain in that report as an escape clause for this government when the timing is right. Let's remember what this intervention was all about. The children, bringing the Little Children Are Sacred report to life, so it didn't remain an ignored and dusty report with recommendations that were never acted upon. They were last year. It was a changing and defining moment for Indigenous Australia, and in this matter of public importance, I urge the government to retain all of those elements of the intervention.